Marcus Stone never expected to become Earth's first diplomatic representative to the Stellar Empire. He was just a regular history professor who happened to be in the right place at the right time when the massive alien ship descended upon New York City. The aliens called themselves the Luminari, a species of tall, ethereally beautiful humanoids with iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Their civilization spanned thousands of worlds across multiple galaxies, and they had finally decided that Earth was worthy of their attention. Marcus stood at the base of their crystalline ship, straightening his plain black suit as he waited to be received. The United Nations had chosen him not for any particular diplomatic skill, but because he was one of the few experts in ancient human monarchies and court protocols. The Luminari, they discovered, operated under a strict imperial system. The ship's entrance dissolved into light, and down floated three of the most stunning beings Marcus had ever seen. The Luminari princesses, Rose, Pearl, and Crystal, daughters of the Emperor himself. Their names were translations of their actual names into something humans could pronounce. "This is what Earth sends to greet us." Princess Rose's melodic voice dripped with disdain as she looked down at Marcus. At 7 feet tall, she towered over him. A plain little man in a plain little suit? Pearl giggled, the sound like tinkling bells. Perhaps they couldn't find anyone better. How primitive. Crystal, the youngest, merely wrinkled her nose. He smells of books and dust. Hardly fitting company for imperial princesses. Marcus felt his face flush but kept his composure. He had dealt with entitled students before, these were just entitled students with fancy titles and shimmering skin. He bowed deeply, exactly as protocol demanded. "Your Imperial Highnesses, Earth welcomes you with open arms and peaceful intentions." "At least he knows how to bow," Rose sneered. "Though his form is terrible. Come sisters, let us report to father about this disappointing first contact." As they turned to leave, Marcus called out, "Your Highnesses, I believe protocol demands that all diplomatic greetings conclude with the exchange of wisdom, a sharing of knowledge between our peoples. Or perhaps you're not authorized to conduct such important ceremonies?" The princesses froze. He had done his research well. The exchange of wisdom was sacred in Luminari culture, and to skip it would be a grave insult. More importantly, suggesting they lacked the authority to perform it was a subtle challenge to their status. Rose turned back slowly, her iridescent features tight with barely contained fury. "You dare to lecture us on our own customs, little human?" Marcus smiled politely. "Not at all, Your Highness. I merely wish to show proper respect for your ancient and noble traditions. Unless, of course, you feel they don't apply when dealing with primitives." The trap was set. If they refused, they would be violating their own sacred protocols. If they participated, they would have to treat him as an equal, at least for the ceremony. Pearl hissed something in their musical language, but Crystal raised a hand. "He is correct. Protocol must be observed." Her tone suggested she'd rather eat dirt than admit it. And so began Marcus's first official interaction with the Luminari Empire, forcing 3 arrogant princesses to sit cross-legged with him on the ground, sharing stories and knowledge as equals, while they seethed with barely contained rage. What none of them knew was that this small moment would set in motion events that would change both their civilizations forever. The Emperor was watching, and he was very, very interested in this clever little human who had just taught his daughters a lesson in humility. 3 days after the exchange of wisdom ceremony, Marcus sat in his temporary office at the UN building, reviewing reports about the Luminari Empire. The more he learned, the more fascinating their civilization became. They had achieved incredible technological advances, yet remained bound by ancient traditions and customs that wouldn't have seemed out of place in Earth's medieval courts. His computer screen suddenly flickered and transformed into a shimmering hologram. The face of a Luminari official appeared, their skin glowing with patterns of light that indicated high rank. "Professor Stone," the official spoke, their voice resonating with authority. "His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Light of 1,000 Suns, requests your immediate presence aboard the Imperial vessel. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. The Emperor himself? May I ask the purpose of this summons? His Majesty wishes to discuss educational matters. The official's expression remained neutral, but something in their tone suggested more was at play. Within an hour, Marcus found himself aboard the massive Luminari ship, being led through corridors that seemed to be made of living crystal and light. The three princesses stood at the entrance to the throne room, their expressions a mixture of confusion and barely concealed hostility. "Our father demands your presence, human," Rose said, her voice cold. "Try not to embarrass yourself." The throne room took Marcus's breath away. The ceiling seemed to contain an entire galaxy, stars swirling in patterns that defied physics. On a throne that appeared to be carved from a single diamond sat the Emperor, his presence both terrifying and magnificent. "Professor Marcus Stone," the Emperor's voice filled the chamber like music. "I have reviewed the recording of your exchange of wisdom with my daughters. Most illuminating." Marcus bowed deeply, remembering every detail of court protocol he had studied. "Your Imperial Majesty honors me with this audience. Tell me, Professor," the Emperor leaned forward, his eyes containing actual stars, "how did you learn our protocols so thoroughly in the brief time since our arrival?" "I studied the information packet your advance team provided, Your Majesty. As a historian, I recognize that understanding protocol is often the key to understanding a civilization." The Emperor's laugh was like distant thunder. "And understand it you did. My daughters have spent centuries being educated in diplomacy, yet you, a simple human teacher, managed to outmaneuver them using their own rules." The princesses shifted uncomfortably. Pearl looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Your Majesty," Marcus chose his words carefully, "I merely wish to ensure proper respect was shown to your empire's traditions." "Indeed." The Emperor rose, his form seeming to tower to the ceiling. "And that is precisely why you are perfect for what I have in mind." "Father?" Crystal's voice held a note of worry. "What are you planning?" "My daughters," the Emperor's voice grew stern, "you have lived lives of privilege and power, yet you lack the wisdom to wield it properly. Your behavior during first contact with Earth proved this beyond doubt." Rose stepped forward. "Father, if this is about our treatment of the human dash." Silence. The Emperor's command was soft but absolute. "I have made my decision. Professor Stone has proven himself knowledgeable in our ways, clever in their application, and most importantly, humble despite his victories." Marcus felt a growing sense of unease. The Emperor's next words confirmed his worst fears. "Therefore, to teach you the wisdom you so clearly lack, I am naming Professor Marcus Stone as your husband. All three of you shall be wed to him, as is my right under imperial law regarding diplomatic unions." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood frozen, his mind racing. The princesses looked like they had been struck by lightning. Finally, Rose found her voice. "Father, you cannot be serious. He's human." "My word is law," the Emperor stated simply. "The weddings will take place in one standard week. Professor Stone, I trust you will use this time to further study our marriage customs?" Marcus managed a weak nod, wondering how on earth he was going to explain this to the UN Security Council. The news of Marcus's impending marriage to the three Luminari princesses spread through Earth's diplomatic circles like wildfire. The UN Security Council had been in emergency sessions for 2 days straight, trying to determine if this was a brilliant political opportunity or a potential disaster. Marcus sat in his new quarters aboard the Imperial ship, surrounded by holographic texts about Luminari marriage customs. His head was spinning from the complexity of it all. The room itself was like something from a dream, with walls that changed color based on his mood, currently a nervous shade of green. A soft chime announced a visitor. To his surprise, it was Princess Crystal, the youngest of his future wives. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking less imperial and more like a confused young woman, albeit one who was 7 feet tall and glowed like moonlight. "I brought you something," she said quietly, placing a small crystal cube on his desk. "It's a memory device containing personal accounts of successful diplomatic marriages in our history. I thought it might help." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Thank you, Your Highness. That's very thoughtful." Crystal shifted uncomfortably. "My sisters are still furious. Rose hasn't stopped raging since Father's announcement, and Pearl keeps trying to find legal loopholes to prevent the marriage." "And you?" Marcus asked carefully. She paused, choosing her words. "I'm trying to understand Father's wisdom in this decision. He's never been one to act without purpose." Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red light pulsed through the corridors, and Crystal's skin flickered with patterns Marcus had never seen before. "What's happening?" he asked, standing up. "Pirates," Crystal spat the word. "Outcasts from our empire who prey on diplomatic vessels. They must have followed us to Earth." The ship shuddered under what Marcus assumed was weapons fire. Crystal grabbed his arm. "Come on. We need to get to the secure chamber." They ran through the crystalline corridors, passing Luminari crew members rushing to battle stations. Marcus was surprised to find he could keep up with Crystal's pace. Perhaps Earth's stronger gravity had given him an advantage. They rounded a corner and found Rose and Pearl already at the entrance to the secure chamber, arguing with the guards. "We are not going in there with him," Rose was saying as they approached. Another blast rocked the ship. Pearl stumbled, and Marcus instinctively caught her before she could fall. She stared at him in surprise, a faint pink glow spreading across her cheeks before she quickly pulled away. "This is not the time for prejudice," Crystal snapped at her sisters. "Father ordered that his safety is our responsibility. Or do you want to explain to him why you left his chosen consort exposed to danger?" Rose looked like she'd swallowed something sour, but she stepped aside. They all entered the secure chamber together, its walls thick with layers of energy shielding. Through the chamber's viewing screen, they watched the space battle unfold. The pirates' ships were smaller but numerous, swarming around the Imperial vessel like angry wasps. "Why aren't we just jumping away?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "We can't risk a space fold this close to Earth," Pearl explained, seemingly forgetting her disdain in the heat of the moment. "The gravitational distortion could devastate your planet's weather systems." Marcus absorbed this information, his mind racing. "Your ships use crystalline technology, right? And the pirates are probably using stolen Luminari tech." Rose turned to him with narrowed eyes. "What of it?" "Well," Marcus said slowly, "I was reading about your ship designs. Crystalline systems have harmonic frequencies. If the pirates are using older stolen ships..." Crystal's eyes widened. "We could send out a resonance pulse tuned to old Imperial frequencies. It would disrupt their systems without affecting our updated technology." Pearl was already at the communication panel, relaying the suggestion to the bridge. Within minutes, a wave of invisible energy pulsed from their ship. The pirate vessels began to drift, their weapons going dark. The princesses stared at Marcus with new eyes. Rose spoke first, her voice reluctant but clear. "That was not entirely stupid." "Indeed," came a new voice. They turned to see the Emperor's hologram materializing in the chamber. "Once again, Professor Stone demonstrates why I chose him. Not through superior technology or strength, but through knowledge and quick thinking." Marcus noticed that Pearl and Crystal were looking at him with thoughtful expressions. Even Rose seemed less hostile. The Emperor's hologram smiled knowingly before fading away. 1 week until the wedding, and Marcus had just survived his first space battle while inadvertently impressing his future wives. He wondered what other surprises the universe had in store for him. 3 days before the wedding, Marcus found himself in what the Luminari called the Garden of Reflections. It was a massive chamber filled with plants from 1,000 worlds, each one more strange and beautiful than the last. Floating orbs of light drifted between crystalline trees, and flowers that looked like captured galaxies bloomed in perfectly maintained beds. He wasn't alone. Rose, the eldest princess, had been ordered by the emperor to give Marcus a personal tour of the garden. Her usual disdain was still present, but somewhat muted after the pirate incident. "These are star blossoms," she said, pointing to flowers that seemed to pulse with their own light. "They only grow on worlds with 3 suns." Her voice carried a hint of pride as she added, "I helped cultivate this particular variety myself." Marcus looked at her with genuine interest. "You're a botanist? Is that so surprising?" Rose asked, a defensive edge in her voice. "Did you think princesses only learned how to look pretty and attend ceremonies?" "Actually," Marcus said carefully, "I thought you might be more interested in military strategy, given how quickly you assessed the pirate threat during the attack." Rose paused, looking at him with surprise. "You noticed that?" "I notice a lot of things," Marcus smiled. "Like how you positioned yourself between the pirate's most likely entry point and your sisters during the attack, even while complaining about being in the same room as me." A faint purple blush colored Rose's cheeks. "It's my duty to protect them," she said quietly. "As the eldest. You carry the heaviest burden," Marcus finished. "It's the same in many Earth cultures. The eldest royal child bears the most responsibility." Rose was silent for a moment, studying a floating light orb. "Father says your world has no unified government, yet you seem to understand royal duties better than many of our own nobles." "I spent my life studying how different cultures handle power and responsibility," Marcus explained. "The patterns are often similar, even across different planets, it seems." Their conversation was interrupted by Pearl's arrival. The middle princess carried what looked like a crystal tablet, her expression troubled. "The wedding preparations are behind schedule," she announced. "The ceremonial light crystals aren't harmonizing properly, and the traditional marriage songs need to be adjusted for human vocal ranges." Marcus noticed the dark circles under Pearl's eyes, or whatever passed for them on a luminari. "Have you been working on this all night?" Pearl straightened proudly. "These ceremonies have been performed the same way for 10,000 years. They must be perfect. Even if it means exhausting yourself?" Marcus asked. "Because I've noticed you skipping meals to work on the preparations. A tired princess makes mistakes, and I thought perfection was the goal." Rose made a sound that might have been a quickly disguised laugh. Pearl looked startled. That's..." Pearl stumbled over her words. "Let me help," Marcus offered. "I may not understand all your traditions yet, but I'm pretty good at solving problems. Plus, it is my wedding too." The 2 princesses exchanged glances. Finally, Pearl handed him the crystal tablet. The light crystals need to resonate at exactly the right frequency to symbolize harmony between souls. But adding a human element has disrupted the traditional patterns. Marcus studied the complex mathematical formulas on the tablet. What if, instead of trying to force human patterns to match luminary ones, we create a new harmony that incorporates both? Like a duet instead of trying to make one singer match another's exact notes? Crystal appeared from behind a luminescent tree, where she'd apparently been listening. "That could work. It would symbolize our cultures coming together instead of one submitting to the other. It would break 10,000 years of tradition," Rose pointed out, but her tone was thoughtful rather than dismissive. "Sometimes," Marcus said gently, "traditions need to grow to stay meaningful. Like your star blossoms, you didn't just preserve them, you helped them adapt to grow better." Rose touched one of the glowing flowers, a small smile playing at her lips. "Perhaps there is wisdom in that view." The four of them spent the rest of the day working together, finding ways to blend their different cultures into something new yet respectful of the old. For the first time, it felt less like an arranged diplomatic marriage and more like a group of people trying to build something meaningful together. None of them noticed the Emperor watching through a hidden observation crystal, a satisfied smile on his face. His plan was working even better than he'd hoped. 2 days before the wedding, trouble arrived in the form of Lord Bright Star, one of the most powerful nobles in the Luminari Empire. His ship docked with the imperial vessel in a display of flashing lights and crystalline splendor that made the original diplomatic arrival look modest. Marcus watched from a viewing chamber as the noble's entourage boarded, their armor gleaming with stored starlight. Crystal stood beside him, her expression worried. Lord Bright Star was supposed to be my future husband, she explained quietly. Before father's unexpected decision. Marcus turned to her in surprise. I didn't know that. He's not happy about losing his chance at a royal marriage, Rose added, entering the chamber with Pearl. And he's powerful enough to cause problems. The doors slid open, and Lord Bright Star strode in. He was taller than the princesses, his skin radiating patterns of light that spoke of ancient noble bloodlines. His eyes fixed on Marcus with the intensity of a laser. So this is the human who dares to marry our princesses, he said, his melodic voice carrying an edge of contempt. I invoke the right of challenge. The princesses gasped. Pearl stepped forward. You can't. Father has already decided. Even the emperor must honor the ancient laws, Lord Bright Star cut her off. Any noble may challenge a royal marriage if they believe the chosen consort is unworthy. The human must prove his worth in the trial of 3 virtues, or the marriage cannot proceed. Marcus noticed how the Lord said human like it was a dirty word. What exactly does this trial involve? Wisdom, courage, and power, Rose explained, her voice tight with concern. 3 tests to prove worthiness for royal marriage. No one has invoked this law in 1,000 years. Because no one would dare question the Emperor's choice, Crystal added, glaring at Lord Bright Star. The Lord smiled coldly. These are unprecedented times. Surely if the human is worthy of not 1 but 3 princesses, he can pass 3 simple tests. Marcus straightened his back. He was tired of being talked about like he wasn't in the room. I accept your challenge, Lord Bright Star. Marcus, no. Pearl grabbed his arm. The trials can be dangerous. Some challengers have died. Then it's a good thing I have 3 brilliant princesses to help me prepare, Marcus said with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. He turned to Lord Bright Star. When do we begin? Tomorrow at dawn, the Lord declared. First comes the test of wisdom, then courage, and finally power. You have until then to prepare. He turned and swept out of the room, his entourage following like a glittering wave. As soon as he was gone, the princesses burst into action. Rose pulled out a crystal tablet, already calling up information about past trials. Pearl began pacing, muttering about training programs and preparation protocols. Crystal simply stood close to Marcus, her worry evident in her flickering skin patterns. We need to tell father, Rose said. He can stop this. No, Marcus said firmly. Lord Bright Star is right about one thing, these are unprecedented times. If I'm going to help bridge our cultures, I need to prove I can honor and uphold your traditions, even the difficult ones. Pearl stopped pacing. But you don't understand. The test of power usually involves direct energy manipulation. No human has ever. Then we'll find another way, Marcus said. You 3 have been trained in all aspects of your culture since birth. Help me prepare. There must be ways to approach these trials that don't require being luminary. Crystal's eyes widened. Like how you solved the pirate attack. Not through superior technology, but through understanding and creative thinking. Exactly, Marcus smiled. Lord Bright Star expects me to fail because I'm human. But being human might be exactly what helps me succeed. Rose was already drafting a training schedule. We have 18 hours until dawn. If we work together, we can do this, Pearl finished, her determination overtaking her worry. As they began their preparation, Marcus caught a glimpse of his reflection in a crystal wall. The same ordinary human face looked back at him, but now it was surrounded by 3 glowing princesses, all focused on helping him succeed. How strange that the Emperor's punishment for their arrogance had somehow turned into genuine cooperation and care. Tomorrow would prove if it was enough. Dawn on the Imperial ship brought with it a gathering of hundreds of Luminari nobles, all come to witness the trial of 3 virtues. The great ceremonial hall shimmered with the combined light of so many highborn aliens, creating patterns that danced across the crystalline walls. Marcus stood in the center of the hall, wearing ceremonial robes that Pearl had helped him choose. They were a deep blue that somehow managed to complement both his human coloring and the Luminari's natural glow. Rose, Pearl, and Crystal stood to the side with the Emperor, their faces showing barely contained anxiety. Lord Bright Star stepped forward, his armor now ceremonial and even more elaborate. The first trial is the test of wisdom. You must solve the riddle of starlight. A holographic projection appeared in the center of the hall, showing a complex series of stars and energy patterns. Marcus recognized it from his studies. It was a representation of Luminari space lanes and trading routes. Our merchants are losing ships in this sector, Lord Bright Star explained, highlighting a region. Find the cause, human. Marcus studied the pattern carefully, remembering what Crystal had taught him about their navigation systems. The answer came to him suddenly. The problem isn't in that sector, he said clearly. It's here. He pointed to a different area. This star is about to go supernova. Your ships are being damaged by the early gravitational effects. They show up in that sector because of how your space lanes curve through 4-dimensional space. A murmur went through the crowd. Lord Bright Star's face tightened. Correct, he growled. But knowledge without courage is meaningless. The second trial begins now. The floor beneath Marcus vanished. He fell into what appeared to be a combat arena, filled with holographic enemies. Real weapons materialized around him. Defeat your opponents, Lord Bright Star commanded from above. Marcus looked at the weapons, then at the advancing holograms. Rose had warned him about this. The weapons were real, but using them would be expected. What would truly show courage? He stood straight and raised his empty hands. I decline to fight. You refuse the trial? Lord Bright Star laughed. Then you fail. No, Marcus said firmly. True courage isn't about fighting when you can. It's about knowing when not to fight. These are holograms, powered by your ship's crystals. They can't actually harm me, and attacking them would waste energy better used for ship functions. A leader should know when violence is necessary and when it's just for show. The Emperor's laugh rang out through the hall. The holograms vanished, and the floor reformed under Marcus's feet. Well reasoned, the Emperor said. But now comes the test of power. No clever words will help you channel stellar energy like a Luminari. Lord Bright Star smiled triumphantly. Yes, let's see how a human handles raw stellar power. A ball of pure energy appeared between them, pulsing with the power of a small star. The challenge was to shape and control it, something only Luminari physiology could do. But Marcus remembered what he had learned about their energy technology while studying their ships. He looked at the 3 princesses, each one radiating their own unique energy pattern, and had an idea. I cannot channel this energy alone, he admitted. No human can. But that's not what marriage is about, is it? Marriage is about working together, combining strengths. He held out his hands to Rose, Pearl, and Crystal. Will you help me? The princesses stepped forward without hesitation. They joined hands, forming a circle around the energy ball. Their combined power flowed through the circle, and Marcus guided it, using his understanding of their energy patterns to suggest shapes and forms. Together, they transformed the raw power into a beautiful crystalline structure that represented both human and luminary designs. Lord Brightstar's face had gone pale. This is not how the trial is supposed to work. No, the Emperor agreed, stepping forward. It is better. The old trials tested individual worth. But my daughter's future husband has shown something far more valuable. He understands that true power comes from working together, from combining different strengths to create something greater than any one person could achieve alone. The crystalline structure continued to spin between them, human and luminary energy patterns weaving together in perfect harmony. The watching nobles burst into applause, their own light patterns showing approval. Marcus looked at his future wives, seeing not arrogant princesses but partners. They smiled back at him, their earlier disdain replaced by something that looked remarkably like love. The day of the wedding arrived in a spectacular display of light and color. The imperial ship's great ceremonial hall had been transformed into a space that honored both human and luminary traditions. Crystal flowers from the Garden of Reflections floated in the air, their light pulsing in harmony with the new frequency patterns Marcus and Pearl had designed together. The attending nobles were surprised to find themselves seated in a circular arrangement rather than the traditional hierarchical rows. Rose had supported Marcus's suggestion, explaining that it symbolized the unity of their peoples and the breaking down of old barriers. Marcus stood in the center, wearing a suit that somehow merged earth formal wear with luminary light fabric. He watched as his three brides entered the hall, each one radiating their own unique beauty. Rose, the eldest, glowed with a fierce pride that had transformed from arrogance into strength. She caught Marcus's eye and gave him a small nod, one leader acknowledging another. Pearl, the middle princess, moved with precise grace, her skin shimmering with the complex patterns she had worked so hard to perfect for the ceremony. The dark circles under her eyes were gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. Crystal, the youngest, practically danced down the aisle, her natural enthusiasm no longer hidden behind royal protocol. She had been the first to see Marcus as a person rather than just a human, and her joy was infectious. The Emperor rose from his crystalline throne, his voice filling the chamber. Today marks not just a marriage, but a new chapter in the history of our peoples. When I first announced this union, many thought it was merely a punishment for my daughter's pride. He paused, his star-filled eyes twinkling. They were only partly right. A ripple of surprised laughter went through the crowd. Even Lord Brightstar, standing stiffly in his place of honor, managed a small smile. I saw an opportunity, the Emperor continued. Not just to teach my daughter's humility, but to show our entire empire a valuable truth. Greatness does not come from power alone, but from wisdom, courage, and the ability to see worth in others. Marcus stepped forward to meet his brides as they reached the center. The Emperor raised his hands, and ribbons of pure starlight began to weave around the four of them. In the old traditions, the Emperor spoke, this light would bind their energies together. But today, we do something new. Marcus and the princesses joined hands, just as they had during the trial. But this time, instead of just channeling energy, they began to glow with a light all their own. It wasn't the natural luminescence of the luminari, nor was it quite human. It was something entirely new. The universe is vast, Marcus said, speaking the traditional words they had modified together. But love bridges the greatest distances. We are different, Rose continued, her voice strong and clear, but our differences make us stronger. Apart, we are incomplete, Pearl added, her perfect diplomatic tone carrying genuine emotion. Together, we are more than we ever dreamed. And in our union, Crystal finished, practically glowing with happiness, we find not an end, but a beginning. The emperor touched each of their joined hands with his staff of office. What pride once divided, understanding has united. What began as a lesson in humility has become a lesson for us all. He turned to address the assembled crowd. Let it be known throughout the empire, humanity is not beneath us. They are our equals, our partners, and now, our family. The ceremony concluded with a display of light and energy that combined Earth's fireworks with luminary stellar manipulation. As the celebrations began, Marcus found himself surrounded by his new wives, each one holding his hand in their own way, Rose with protective strength, Pearl with elegant grace, and Crystal with unbridled enthusiasm. "Well, husband," Rose said, trying out the word. "Ready to help us rule an empire?" Marcus looked at each of them in turn, seeing not the arrogant princesses who had once laughed at him, but three remarkable women who had learned to grow beyond their prejudices. "As long as we do it together," he replied. The emperor watched from his throne as the four of them moved through the celebration, already working as one unit, complementing each other's strengths and supporting each other's weaknesses. His plan had worked better than he'd ever imagined. In seeking to teach his daughters humility, he had given his empire a future brighter than all the stars in their realm. And somewhere on Earth, a humble professor's office stood empty, waiting for a man who had walked into the stars and found not just a new life, but a new way of bringing worlds together.